With every launch of a new next-generation console, a new generation of players, games, and expectations come with it. Another 7 or 8 years of gamers waiting anxiously to see how this console will succeed the one that came before it. We see how these expectations have influenced every part of consoles in their evolution, from their power to size and the games that launch with them. As market demands shape how each console iteration ultimately ends up becoming, I can't help but ask, how did we end up here? Taking the launch of the Switch 2 as the latest example of this, I question specifically the evolution of handheld gaming and whether this will affect an entire generation on how they will remember what exactly handheld console gaming even is. What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Anna. I'm a variety gamer who likes to play a bunch of video games and talk about them here. I hope everybody's been well this past month. How have you all been? What have you been playing recently? I know for me, this month has been extremely busy. I was traveling, working a lot, and yeah, just trying to fit in gaming where I can, but it's definitely been hard for me to squeeze in some gaming here and there in between all the craziness. For me this month, I have unsurprisingly been pretty glued to my Switch 2 since it came out. I've been playing a bunch of new games on it like Mario Kart World, Split Fiction. I just started Deltarune chapters 3 and 4, and I actually got the Switch 2 for free, which is insane to say. Nintendo basically reached out to me and offered me a free Switch 2 right before it came out. I was all set with my pre-order and everything, but then they reached out and I was like, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna take the free console, which is funny because I talked mad shit about how ugly I thought the design was when it was first revealed. I mean, come on, I'm gonna take the free Switch 2. I was gonna get it anyways. In all seriousness though, I am extremely grateful that I got this for free. I've never received a package so generous before, and I owe it to the people who support me through my content. With all that being said, a lot of people have been asking for my review on the Switch 2, and I'm obviously going to be as honest as possible. So first, let's go through what I like about the Switch 2. I think my favorite part about it is obviously the screen. It's beautiful. It's such an upgrade from the base Switch, which is the only Switch that I had. The beautiful display is definitely what feels like the biggest upgrade experiencing games on the Switch 1 compared to the Switch 2. There's not that like huge discrepancy in the graphics when you switch from TV console to handheld mode. I do also like the Joy-Con magnets. I like how secure they feel and how they attach to the console, and it's obviously just an overall improvement on an already amazing console, like the FPS improvements, the graphic improvements, the speed of how fast it runs games. In terms of what I dislike about the Switch 2, I still don't like the overall design. I think it's a little bit boring. I still hate the colors. I never really liked this like blue-red combo. I wish that the Joy-Con sticks were a little bit more sturdy feeling. Although they feel a little bit more smooth, I feel like if you are using the Switch 2 mostly in handheld mode and using mostly the Joy-Cons, I just feel like the Joy-Con drift is inevitable. It feels like there wasn't a big enough improvement to avoid that. In terms of what I feel neutral about, I definitely feel neutral about the size of this console. So basically, I took this Switch 2 on a trip to Vancouver this past month, and I feel like with a case on, you could very much tell how much space it takes up in your bag. And I understand that this is the compromise that you have to make when you have this like beautiful huge screen, but it definitely feels a little bit awkward with how big it's gotten, especially if you're trying to still treat this as like a handheld console that you can also like play in bed sideways. And then obviously let's just address the elephant in the room. This console is expensive. It's over $550, I think, for the Mario Kart bundle. So I've had a lot of people ask me, do I think this console is worth it? Before answering this question, I just want to say I'm not the most hardware tech savvy person in the world, and I'm going to give a more personal anecdote of whether I think that this console is worth it rather than doing a literal like cost analysis of the hardware to other tech competitors to determine its worth. So I know I said that I got the Switch 2 for free, but I was already going to spend the money to get it. I had my pre-order ready and everything, and this is because I felt like this upgrade was justifiable for me. I feel like I've spent most of my time playing games on my Switch 1 more than any other console. It's probably my favorite console. It has my favorite game on it, and there's just so many games that I played on the Switch up until now, so I felt like the upgrade from the Switch 1 base Switch 1 to the Switch 2 was definitely a justifiable upgrade. With a game like Mario Kart World, I am able to play with my partner who I live with, so that has been a lot of fun for us. We're just able to play some nights on the couch together. So I definitely think that this game is meant for people who can play with like roommates or family or friends if you see them often. But for people who didn't play a lot of Switch games or feel like they don't have those groups of people to play something like Mario Kart World with, I probably don't think it's super worth it to get this console right now. There's just not enough launch titles to really justify getting it at this very moment. I think if Donkey Kong Bonanza had come out with the Switch 2, it might have been a little bit more justified. I think it's actually pretty interesting that Donkey Kong Bonanza wasn't a launch title because it looks like an amazing game. It looks like Odyssey with more things to do, and I think it would have been a really cool title to launch the console with, and I feel like since it's coming out pretty soon, I don't know, I just feel like it should have just came with the console launch. And obviously the Switch 2 has had quite the contentious launch because of its price. It's the most expensive Nintendo console to date, and you know, this is after Nintendo has really built this reputation of having a little bit more affordable consoles compared to its competitors like Sony, PlayStation. Mario Kart World is $80 alone without the bundle, and actually my hot take on this is that I think the $80 price tag is going to be more normalized, and I think Nintendo was just down to be the first ones to do it for AAA games. People called for boycotts. People are saying that Nintendo is being anti-consumer as always. But despite all of this, Nintendo has reported themselves that 3.5 million units sold in 4 days since launch, and it's the fastest selling Nintendo console ever. The best way I can describe this whole situation is Nintendo just feels like the toxic ex that we always go back to. They really pull some frustrating shit every now and then, but damn do we love their products. So with the next gen Nintendo console finally here, it started to make me think about the evolution of Nintendo handheld consoles in general. And as someone who primarily grew up with Nintendo consoles and games, I wanted to take a step back and take a little trip down memory lane of all the handheld consoles that I got to experience in the Nintendo lineup. So this is the oldest Nintendo handheld console that I own. It's the Game Boy that came out in 1989. I actually don't remember playing any games on this. I don't actually know why I even have this in my possession. I think I probably stole it from my parents or something, but this came out well before I was born, and yeah, I don't remember having any memories of actually playing anything on this. My first memory of owning handheld consoles and playing any type of handheld games started with the Game Boy Color. I actually have two here. The red one is mine, and I'm pretty sure the yellow one is actually my brother's. I don't know why I have both of them here, but I specifically remember playing my first Pokemon games on them. I also remember playing a Hamtaro game on it, and then following the Game Boy, I played a ton on my Game Boy Advance and my Game Boy Advance SP. I unfortunately don't have them here, which is really sad because I had a really cute orange Game Boy Advance. So many fun memories of playing games on the GBA for sure. I think some of my favorites still to this day are the Pokemon games, Pokemon Ruby, Emerald, and Sapphire. Ooh, definitely Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. I still think this is one of the most underrated Nintendo Mario games out there. Very vivid memories of being in elementary school and not knowing how to play Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. And I specifically remember how great of an upgrade it felt to have a GBA then get an SP because there was no light when it came to playing on the GBA. I don't know if people remember, but I bought one of those like stick light things that you would like hover over your screen on the GBA so you can play in the dark. And this was basically how kids started playing video games under their covers. They would have to have this like awkward light thing hovering over their screen to do that. Then came the DS in 2004. This is probably one of my favorite Nintendo inventions of all time. I sunk so many hours into playing my DS, and I still have it here. As you can see, I had the base Nintendo DS, and I actually never upgraded this. It's pretty much hanging by a thread. You can actually see the screen is like about to fall off if I like kind of move it around like this, but it still works. Yeah, it still works. I do have a GBA game plugged in here right now. Let's see what we have. It's the Japanese version of Hamtaro Heartbreak. I think that's what it's called in English. Great game. Actually, amazing game. I used to have a pink stylus because I had the Kirby game that came with that pink stylus. Let's see what DS game is in here. Oh, we have Tetris DS, also one of the best Tetris games ever made. Although I lost a lot of GBA and Game Boy games that I grew up with, I do have a lot of the DS games that I played a lot of. And a lot of these games, I have them in the Japanese version because we would buy a lot of games in Japan when we visited my family, and the DS was backwards compatible, so we would get a bunch of Japanese games earlier than the North American releases. So we got Mario Kart DS. I think in English this is the Tamagotchi Plaza DS version. Super Mario 64 DS. This one was the one with the gambling in it. I think this is Brain Age. I think that's what it's called in English. One of my favorite WarioWare games of all time, WarioWare Touched. The gameplay for this would get so intense sometimes. It would get so fast. And this is the Kirby game I was talking about. It's called Touch Kirby in Japanese. I'm not sure what the English name is, but this is the one that came with that pink stylus. I have the Japanese version of the new Super Mario Bros. Oh, we can't forget about Nintendogs. I treated like my Nintendogs like real pets in real life. I love them so much and spent so much of my time playing this game. But nothing could compare to how many hours I sunk into Animal Crossing Wild World. Still one of the best games in the Animal Crossing lineup, and I think this is more special to me than Animal Crossing New Horizons for sure. And then I have in case form Tetris DS. Still one of my favorite Tetris versions to exist. And then I also had this case that I would store my DS games in, and the only game that I don't have the proper case for is Pokemon Diamond. But man, I have so many fond memories bringing my DS everywhere with me. I would bring them on vacations. I would bring them to school. I specifically remember being in high school actually, and a lot of people would bring their DS with Mario Kart, and after we finished like the busy term of taking AP tests, we would just bring our DSs to play Mario Kart during class because we were pretty much done with our studies past the AP test period. I remember also vaguely bringing the DS on field trips, and we would try to use PictoChat on the bus, and I just remember like we had a weird obsession with like filling the screen completely black, and that was like our way to kill boredom as kids. Specifically when we didn't feel like playing any game, we just wanted to mess around on the DS menu screen. And then came the 3DS in 2011. This is actually the first Nintendo handheld console that I didn't get for myself. This is actually borrowed, and I basically stole it from my college friend. So Katie, if you're watching this, I still have this and need to return it to you. And I super regret not getting this console because I think there's a lot of cool games on the 3DS. And I already decided the next time I'm going to Japan, I'm going to pick out a 3DS for me to buy. I specifically want the creamsicle orange white one. And yeah, I just feel like this console, I really regret not getting it because there's just so many amazing games on it. And I feel like it's just a shame to not physically own a lot of these games. So I'm gonna definitely get one in the future. I think at this period of time, I was just like getting really busy with school. I was getting really serious about applying to college and making sure my grades were straight. So this was when I started to like not be into video games as much, but I still do remember playing a few games that were incredibly impactful for my childhood, just borrowing my brother's 3DS when I could. Playing Alpha Sapphire was a no-brainer for me because Gen 3 is my favorite gen in Pokemon and one of my favorite games of all time, and this was an amazing remake of that generation. And then of course we have Animal Crossing New Leaf. I think this is my favorite Animal Crossing game, one of my favorite games of all time, and there's so much about this game that I wish was brought back in New Horizons, and I don't know, there's just a magic about this game that was not recreated in the latest title. I really remember with Animal Crossing New Leaf that the Street Pass feature incorporated in this game was so cool. Basically, you would get Street Passes of other people who had Animal Crossing and they could showcase their houses, and there was just like this neighborhood where you could go through other people's houses as you acquired them through Street Pass, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. I loved looking at other people's houses when I felt like it wasn't as accessible to just like look up design inspiration. I felt like it wasn't too much of a thing to upload that kind of content on the internet for everyone to see. So being able to see how other people design their houses was just really cool for me. And obviously with Street Pass, it's just a really cool feature that I feel like we can talk forever about how cool it was that that was a thing. I'm actually going to Anime Expo this week, and I feel like it would be really cool to bring even my friends' borrowed 3DS to that just to see how many Street Pass hits we can get. And then finally, we have the Switch that came out in 2017. I got this in my senior year of college. I was actually just about close to graduating. I had also just gone out of a breakup, and yeah, I was just too busy to play games for the 4 years I was in college. Games was not on my list of hobbies really throughout that entire period I was at college. But this was really the perfect way to get back into gaming because I was working a lot more than studying because I was getting ready to graduate. I was experiencing a lot of senioritis, and I felt like I was gradually getting back into my hobbies as someone who was about to become an adult and finally get out of school. And the fact that, Breath of the Wild was the launch title for this game, it was so easy to get sucked back into gaming. Breath of the Wild is now my favorite game of all time. So, of course, this has had quite an impact on my life, even though it doesn't feel like that long ago that this console came out. It now feels a little bit nostalgic thinking back of how this console exactly started. So needless to say, I've had a lot of fond memories just playing Nintendo handheld consoles and growing up with them. They were a huge part of my childhood to grow up with, and it was a little bit of a different experience from growing up with TV consoles. We took handheld consoles on our trips and vacations. We took them to our neighbor's house to play with friends outside of our home. And the portability of them by nature made it easier for us to play more handheld games. So now we made it to the Switch 2, and with the Switch 2 being out, I started thinking more about how the Switch 2 is even a thing, like it even existing. This is the first direct console sequel of a console in the Nintendo lineup, the first 2 version of anything. Yes, we had things like the Wii U following up the Wii, and we had like the 3DS following up the DS, but this is the first 2. And it makes sense that they decided not to change much, right? This console was extremely successful. It was super innovative that they had so many competitors following up after it, like the Steam Deck and a bunch of handheld PCs on the market now. And of course, I'm super excited to see what kind of lineup the Switch 2 games will have, especially when you think about the amazing lineup the Switch 1 had. On the flip side though, the Switch 2 feels like another reminder that handheld gaming as we knew it is a thing of the past. And just me saying that feels like I'm mourning something. Back then, handheld games were made with the handheld experience in mind. Games made for the DS were made with the touchscreen in mind, with the 2-screen experience in mind. We used to have handheld games and console games come out at the same time, and I totally understand that this is not realistic financially anymore, especially with the demands of modern gaming. I mean, Nintendo is struggling to get launch titles out, so this is not a realistic expectation anymore at all. But man, just think about back then, we used to get Wii games at the same time as DS games. We had GBA games coming out at the same time as GameCube games. We lost things like PictoChat and Street Pass, a deprioritization of these community features that were inherently built for the handheld experience. And to state the obvious, the Switch 2 is huge. It being handheld doesn't necessarily mean it's portable. Even the Switch 1 I feel like could pass as portable still. It's still one of those consoles that you can play in bed laying down. I think this TikTok I saw worded it well.
You can't just take your Switch 2 out of the house in your hand. You just can't do it. You need a bag. You need a sling. They're not just pocket and go like the PSPs and the DSs, right? Like, are we really gonna sit here and argue that there was not a convenient beautifulness to these devices?
The comments in this TikTok also make some interesting points as well. The problem is people simultaneously demand power. There simply isn't technology powerful enough to allow for modern high-fidelity gaming in that small of a form. Therefore, specific games will have to be made for each dependent portable console. And then there's the whole separate conversation of perhaps the true culprit when it comes to killing handheld gaming is the mobile gaming market. So to wrap up all this, what is my point in saying all of this? I'm not saying that the Switch was solely responsible for the disappearance of handheld games and consoles. The demands for the market has led us here. The existence of the Switch and the Switch 2 is an implicit consequence of people deciding that handheld gaming, pure handheld consoles as we knew it, just isn't really needed anymore. And there's a lot of reason to feel bittersweet about that, especially after I just did that whole retrospective. I think the bitterness comes from, you know, Nintendo's handheld games curated for the handheld experience were some of the best games ever made, and this is something that a whole generation is going to miss out on. And culturally, losing something like that as we get older is something that I can't help but mourn. But the sweet part is obviously that, you know, we're still going to get a lot of amazing games on the Switch too, and we're going to see game lineup is going to be incredible as time passes. That's pretty much all I have to say on this topic. I would love to know your guys' opinions as usual. What do you guys think about handheld gaming, the past, present, and future of it? For next month, I'm going to definitely be picking up Donkey Kong Bonanza. I originally wasn't going to get that game, but I watched the direct presentation for it and I was like, this game looks so cool and so incredible, so I'm definitely going to be picking that up. Until then, I will see you guys for the next video next month, and thank you guys so much for watching as always. Bye!